I've been involved for some time in politics now. I guess I was 14 years old when my grandfather brought me to the first AGM of a political party. And so I'm going to answer, as we look back at history, we always come up with our own judgment and what it was, but I want to just say a word about social credit first. Today we're running a social debt. Social credit to me was running credit for the people, not debt. And so we need to have good government. It's critical that we have good government. Our peace, our prosperity is a result from free market and the rule of law. And that's all basis, and it goes back to our Constitution. Do we have a sound constitution? Do we have rule of law? And when those two questions are answered, the question is, do we have accountability? And without those things, those stable foundations, we can look around the world and see the struggles and the poverty and the oppression and just the terrible state that so many people live under. And for me, as I continue to just get blown away how the propaganda can go out there and how people are unaccountable, and we went through 4 years here in Alberta of just unaccountable policies that we were promised are going to have a summer of repeal to get through, and I personally know people who are suffering and struggling because of these policies, whether safety policies, economic policies, or what have you, and there is basically nothing we can do. And human nature is such that we really internally, if we feel that we're hopeless and there's nothing we can do, we don't spend a lot of time or energy to do anything about it. And this goes back to our problem, and again, I want to relate to Alberta here because we had 4 years of political tyranny, of imposing their beliefs, their values on the rest of us, and there was nothing we could do to the next election. And I kind of get a kick out of it, and I love it when Jason Kenney comes up or answers in the House to Rachel and says, well, no, the Albertans have spoken, because she thinks that what he's doing is just deplorable and just terrible, but $60 billion debt's fine. And I have to comment quickly on dear little Greta, who I think is one of the more abused child in the world, and the indoctrination that she's endured. And the fear that seems to be real in her mind is just pitiful, but how many Alberta children go through that same stuff when they talk to their teachers? And I know some of these teachers that, kids are scorned on because they're bringing juice boxes, and parents are now, in one of the schools I was talking to, clipping the box, squeezing it into a bottle, and then they send it that way. And it's just unbelievable the extent that we're going to. But we have this political tyranny, to me, because there's zero accountability for 4 years. What do? They get in, and then there's nothing we can do. And so I feel in our movement to stand up and to say no to the abuse, we need to write down and have, and everybody, there's been a lot of good points brought out on what it is, but we need to stand up and say these are the issues that must be fixed. I'm more than willing to go to marriage council and to lay the issues out there, but I'm also not naive in my own personal experience that the Laurentians are just going to laugh at us. There's not a problem. And what's really sad, when there's an abusive situation, those that are being abused really get into a dark place often before they come out. And I guess for the silver lining in our $60 billion plus debt, we're finally getting into a dark place. And it's interesting to me, the amount of youth that are so worried about this so-called climate change that, as Mark pointed out several times, I mean, we're all should have been gone and evaporated already, according to them, and we're not. But yet the youth has no comprehension of the economic tyranny that's imposed on them and the $60 billion debt here in Alberta. But to get back on the subject of accountability here and the importance of recall, there's 3 things that our new Constitution for Canada or Alberta, Western Canada, and I can't help but always think every time I think of this, well, Germany has an East and a West. We know what it's like to live in the East. We know what it's like to live in the West. And I think Canada can have an East and a West. And so I'm pretty excited about a Western Canada. And so the 3 things that I really want to see in our Constitution, over and above many things that were brought out there, is first, to me, is the accountability through recall. That when a leader steps forward and doesn't even campaign on such things as a carbon tax or new labor legislation for agriculture or whatever it is, new legislation to give us social license for our oil industry, which is such a farce. there's nothing we can do about it. But I personally really believe that we could have easily gone out and recalled 6 or 7 or 8 NDPers and stopped Rachel in her track had we had that in our Alberta legislation as a law on recall, but we don't have it. So we need a recall. But the other nice thing about recall that I really like is that when people are upset and they know, oh, all I got to do is go out and collect, say, 5,000 signatures or 10,000 signatures in my riding to get rid of my elected representative, and they go door knocking and start to collect it, and all of a sudden they realize that, wow, I don't have the support that I thought. And all of a sudden that anger, that animosity, that's nothing that you can do to save yourself, it diminishes. And you start to realize that, oh no, I've talked to lots of people at the door, and I guess that we'll go along with this because democracy is kind of speaking and they have a mandate for those things. And so there's more to it than just this so-called anger, oh, I want to recall this individual, but those that feel like that they have the majority, when they go out to try and have a recall, they'll be appeased, I think, in their mind to say, wow, you know, I guess we can go along with this. And it's important. But along with recall, you need citizens' initiative, people's law, that when we're upset and we want to change or start something, there needs to be a trigger to do that. Mark Milkey put a good article, book out on that, and the importance of citizens' initiative. And these are things that aren't needed very often, but to have them in the toolbox, I believe, changes everything. And then the other thing that for me, we absolutely, and Ted Morton has done a lot of wonderful work on this, we need balanced budget legislation, well, in our Constitution. These things need to be in our Constitution, so the legislature and the House of Commons just can't on a whim change it with a few majority votes and take these away from us. But we need balanced budget legislation in the fact that, yes, Rachel, you want to spend $10 billion, you go ahead and do it. But you need to raise the taxes just like a municipality the next year to pay for that, and you're kind of held accountable. But we really need to think things through. John's done a lot of work on the Constitution and where we're going on that. I have a minute 34, don't I? Yeah, good. I keep track of my money and my time, especially when Danny's around watching me. But we can and we should do better. We have a wonderful, wonderful province here. We have great, hardworking entrepreneurs that if we have the free market, if we have a constitution and the rule of law, we can't have someone like Stelmach make the announcement that, oh, we're going to review oil and gas, and we turned into our first recession. My son lost his job on that account, and I saw so many that struggled through that. But we don't have to have these things. What we need is a rule of law. We need a constitution. We need accountability through recall. We need the citizens' initiative. And then we need balanced budget legislation. And I would love to see it in there to where a government can't tax over 25%. That's it. The most of that can be taken from anybody, any corporation, is 25%. And the other thing we need to have in the Constitution is that for every tax dollar that's out there, it's divided amongst the 3 levels of government. Let the 3 levels of government fight it out. You know, are you going to take 10% to do the municipality when they need 90% of the money, or the federal government? And they can fight about it. And then you don't have the interference where they want to come and spend federal money in a provincial and a municipal one because they're limited on their budget. But they should have to divide it up, know what the percentage are, and go out there. But it's all about the Constitution. It's about the rule of law, and it's about a just society where we, the people, are served by justice, and reparation is the #1 issue of the rule of law so that we can be successful. And time's up, but thank you very much for coming out.